Welcome to another episode of the Assemble Performance Podcast. Today we're going to go over how I handle calorie deficits with my athletes during any of their training, whether it's hybrid training, endurance, or just strength, and even how I handle calorie deficits on my own. I get a lot of questions from Instagram and even in some YouTube comments on how to cut body fat while training, and there's a good amount that goes into it, not too much. I'll kind of keep it high level for you and make sure that we handle mostly just the basics, but I want to make sure you also have actionable steps, and so that's what we're going to go into today. Pretty broadly today, I'm going to go into what a calorie deficit even is for some of you that are not really aware or haven't heard the term before, and then we're going to go into how calorie intakes impact your training, and then get into strength versus endurance training if you are not hybrid training, and lastly, bring it all together into how I handle calorie deficits with hybrid athletes in hybrid training. The portions on strength and endurance will be important because that's going to be the meat of the information, and then we're going to bring it all together for the hybrid training, so definitely stick around for that. Also, if you want a printed PDF guide of basically what I'm going to go over here, I'm going to put the link in the description for my fueling guide. It's not exactly one-to-one the information that I have here, but it is a good starting point. So if you started this podcast, you realize you don't really have the time to finish it, but you want the information and you have time to read over a guide, definitely go down to the description and click through that link. That's going to bring you to a landing page. You just put your email and name in, and then you'll be able to download it. So that said, I'm going to get right into the podcast, and if afterwards you still want a printout, that's going to be there for you to download. So first we need to go over what a calorie deficit is, and to understand that we need to know what a calorie is. A calorie is just a unit of measure. It is the amount of energy equivalent to the heat energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. What a mouthful. But basically, it's how much energy you need to raise a gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. What you see on your food, it says calories, but really that's kilocalories or 1,000 calories. So food labels, they just use the uppercase C for calorie instead of the lowercase c for calorie. The uppercase C for calorie also means kilocalories or kcals if you've seen that somewhere. So every calorie on a nutrition label is actually 1,000 little c calories, or 1,000 units of energy equivalent to raising 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. All right, I'm going to stop with that mouthful, but you get the point. That's a calorie. So just a unit of measure of energy. And so that's why it translates to energy usage in our body. A certain amount of calories is what we need from an energy perspective. Less or more is going to be a deficit or a surplus. A calorie deficit, by definition, is just consuming less calories than you burn. So say you burn 2,500 calories in a day, 2,000 calories a day would be a calorie deficit. So everything you do, just living requires calories, requires energy. Those calories get turned into different things in your body, but glucose is the primary driver of energy. We're not going to get into energy systems today, but just know that being at rest, laying down, moving around, running, everything you do requires calories, even the digestion of food. And so that's everything that goes into the amount of energy you need during the day. And it's why people that move around more generally need to eat more, and people that are larger, whether they have more muscle or more body fat, also have a higher caloric need at rest because they have more tissue that needs metabolically active processes to happen, which all require energy. This is also why muscle mass generally burns more energy than fat, because muscle mass has more blood flow, more caloric demands, more metabolic things that happen under the hood, and those all require energy, more energy than fat would. So I want to address people that say I gained weight and I wasn't in a calorie surplus, or I was in a calorie deficit and I didn't lose weight. Specifically the second one. To lose body weight or body fat, you need to be in a calorie deficit, and you, by definition, cannot lose body weight or body fat without being in a calorie deficit. You need to burn more energy than you intake. You cannot make energy out of nowhere. So the first law of thermodynamics, it's science, says that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed, which is what happens when you eat food. That energy gets transformed into a usable type of energy for your body. So if you were losing weight, you were in a calorie deficit. If you're not losing weight, you're not, no matter what you think. There's a lot of things that go into that. We're not going to go into that today either. But there's a lot of ways that you can be in a calorie surplus and not even realize it. And you might think you're at a deficit, but you're not. But long story short, being in a calorie deficit, you do not have enough energy to sustain your bodily processes. And so your body has to break down tissue to turn the energy that's in that tissue into energy it can use. So ideally, it breaks down the fat to use that. But in more severe or more extreme calorie deficits without adequate strength training or protein intake, it can also break down muscle to use that as energy as well. Because that muscle stores energy, so it breaks it down, it can then use that energy. Again, you cannot gain weight while you're in a calorie deficit. It takes energy to create new tissue, and if you're truly in a deficit, any weight gain that you're going to see is just going to be probably normal water fluctuations. Again, there's a lot of nuance here, but this is high level, and you cannot lose weight in a calorie surplus like I just mentioned. The energy that you eat from that surplus needs to be stored somewhere, and it's going to store that in body fat primarily if it's not needed for your day-to-day activities, the processes that it takes to live day-to-day, so on and so forth. So with that in mind, the fact that we need calories to operate and that the calorie balance that we go through, whether it's a surplus, a maintenance, or a deficit, is impacted by not only what we're intaking, but what we're expending day to day and the types of tissues we have. So more lean muscle is going to be more calorically demanding than lean muscle mass. How does that impact training? How does calorie intake impact training? So as I just mentioned, training, moving around, everything uses energy. So training is going to use energy as well. Hopefully that's not new information. If you don't have enough energy to train, your body is going to limit what you can do or what you do so that it has enough energy to survive. You got to remember the body's number one goal is to survive, and it will stop you from killing yourself. If you were to burn all of your energy, your cells wouldn't have energy to go through their normal processes they have to go through to keep you alive. Your brain needs a lot of energy. All of your cells need a lot of energy. If they don't have energy, so fly in here. If you don't have enough energy, your cells literally can't function. So it's going to stop you before it completely runs out of energy. This is why people starve to death. Their body eats all of their, I would say eats, it doesn't eat, but it breaks down all of their muscle and fat tissue and all the other tissue it can for calories for the cells to continue their processes. And then once you don't have enough energy, you don't have enough energy and you're going to perish. You're going to die. So training increases the amount of calories you burn. All the metabolic processes that happen need calories. There's breakdown of tissues that need repaired. There's just the energy to move the muscles. If you know how muscles use energy, that makes sense to you. If not, just know that every time you move, it uses energy to facilitate that movement and make that movement happen. So training uses a lot of calories. And the heavier you are and the more muscle mass you have, the more calories it will use. So as heavier runners, we have a lot, we burn a lot more calories per hour of running than a smaller, more efficient, skinnier, less muscular runner. And as I said, training also causes damages to your body tissues, and that needs to be healed. You're actually in worse health after you train than you were before you start training directly after. So if you were to measure your health directly before and directly after training, you're actually in worse health directly after training. Your body has damage that occurs during training, whether it's strength or endurance training, and it needs to go through its recovery process to repair those tissues. And in an effort to survive, your body will adapt. It's called supercompensation. Your body will adapt and actually make you stronger and more fit because it doesn't know the difference between lifting weights and running on a track versus like running from a bear or trying to pick a rock up off you or somebody else. So your body just says, I was introduced to something that I was not ready for. I need to adapt to survive. And that's really what training is. At the base level, your body's trying to survive, and it's constantly trying to make sense of the environment and figure out how much energy do I need to survive, because your body's always going to try to be as efficient as possible, and it's very metabolically demanding to create new tissue. So it's not going to create new tissue unless it thinks it needs to survive. So your body is damaged. There is repair that needs to happen after training. That recovery process and repair requires calories. You need to be able to make new tissue and repair current tissue, as well as continue to fuel the movement through the rest of the day, fuel thinking, fuel all these other things. You need calories to recover from training. If you don't have sufficient calories to recover and fuel your day-to-day requirements, the recovery process is not going to be complete. Your body needs to prioritize keeping you alive in the present over recovering some things that happened yesterday or a few hours ago. And this can put you in a slightly under-recovered state. And if chronic, this can lead to a larger problem. It can make you chronically under-recovered. It can lead to injury, overtraining, burnout, fatigue, a lot of bad things that we do not want to happen. Now, it is possible to be in a deficit and lose body fat while training without getting injured or burning out. And that's what we're going to go into, is how do we balance these two? Because training and recovery, making adaptation is kind of at odds with losing body fat and recovering. It's possible, people do it all the time, but you need to be mindful and aware of exactly how you're doing that. That way you don't accidentally either fail at your cutting phase, at your diet phase, or lead to injury, overtraining, or burnout. And I've done both, and I've worked with athletes that have done both. So we're going to talk about it. Now, how do we handle calories in training strength versus endurance? What's the difference? Strength and endurance training, they both require recovery, but it's going to be different for each metric, each type of training. In strength training, there's going to be a lower recovery demand generally because of the lower volume, the fact that you generally have more rest, and there's less repetitive motions. Even on a high volume strength plan, that's going to normally be pretty low volume relative to a running plan. And we'll go in that in a minute, but basically you just don't need to do as much volume strength training as you do with running, especially if you're training for a 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, or ultra. The volume is going to scale linearly or exponentially, however you want to see it, based on the distance of the race you're running. So strength training, generally lower volume, you're going to have more rest, you're not consistently working out. So if you're training for 30 minutes in the weight room, the actual amount of time you're doing work is going to be lower than if you go on a 30-minute run, because during that run, you're working the entire time. During strength training, you're working, then resting, then working, then resting. It's different energy systems. That's outside the scope of this podcast, but generally lower volume, more rest, and less repetitive motions. Strength training in a calorie deficit, while you're in a calorie deficit, ensures that you keep more lean muscle and lose more body fat. Your body's going to need to survive, like we talked about before. So if you're in a calorie deficit and you lift weights, your body's going to prioritize losing body fat over muscle, because it's going to think, I need this muscle to survive. I cannot afford to break down this muscle to use for energy, because otherwise I might die. And you see bodybuilders do this all the time. Bodybuilders are in very extreme cuts, very extreme deficits, but they strength train a lot. They eat a lot of protein to make sure they're able to maintain that muscle repair and tissue damage repair. And as a result, they're able to keep a lot of lean muscle mass and lose a lot of body fat. We're not talking about steroids here. Natural bodybuilders are a thing, so just look at natural bodybuilders. But generally, if you're in a calorie deficit and you want to keep lean muscle mass, you need to be strength training, eating enough protein, and then being mindful of these other things. And strength training is going to have a lower recovery demand than endurance training will. Endurance training has a higher recovery demand because there's more volume, there's more repetitive motions, and depending on the endurance activity you choose, there are higher force absorption and production requirements as well. So with endurance training, we're going to use running as an example. You go out on a 30 or 60-minute run, you're working that entire time. Every time you run, or every step you take, every second is work, versus in the weight room where you might be sitting around and resting before the next set. More repetitive motions just means in the weight room, say you do bench, or we'll do lower body. Say you do back squats, then you go do Romanian deadlifts, then you go do split squats. These are all different types of motions, even slightly. Like a back squat has both legs, a split squat has one leg. There are some differences and things like that. When you go out on a run, every single step is the same, or more or less the same. You can get into the minutia of like, oh, my ankle moved a little bit this way on this step and this way on the other step. But generally speaking, 60-minute run, 30-minute run, the entire 30 to 60 minutes or even longer, every single step you take is a repetitive motion. So you're working similar musculature, similar ligaments, and similar tendons, all in the same motion. You're not getting any break from one motion by another motion. And then higher force absorption or production requirements. So this is kind of debatable depending on the strength training you do. But when you're running, there's gravity involved, and your lower legs are continually having to produce and absorb force in a way that's very repetitive. In the weight room, you might be producing and absorbing force very differently. If you're doing plyometrics or sprinting, then this kind of goes out of the equation. You're doing a lot of force production and absorption. But generally, endurance training is going to have more demands for that. All of that said, endurance training is going to burn more energy per unit of time that you're exercising, and it's going to require more energy to replenish those energy stores that you're depleting during training and to repair any damage that happens and adapt. You don't really see endurance athletes doing intense diets during seasons or preparation for seasons like you do strength athletes, bodybuilders, weight class athletes. Real endurance athletes, they do their diets in the off season when they're not training so hard. In season and preseason, they're really not dieting down because endurance activity requires so many calories, so many carbs, so much energy. It's just not sustainable, and they're really running a high risk of burning themselves out and impacting their performance. So we've kind of juxtaposed strength and endurance training and how the calorie demands are so different for each one. So how does this come together for hybrid training? Hybrid training is really both worlds, right? Best and worst of both worlds. In hybrid training, you have to be mindful of overall how large of a calorie deficit you're in, because the endurance training that you're doing is going to have high recovery demands. It's going to burn a lot of calories and a lot of fuel. You're going to need to replenish a lot of carbs. However, with hybrid training, you're going to be able to lose more body fat and less lean muscle mass because of the strength training. So where a regular endurance athlete might lose more lean muscle mass, as a hybrid athlete, you're going to be able to maintain more lean muscle mass while still running because you are using that lean muscle mass in the weight room, and your body's going to prioritize that muscle mass over the body fat when you are in a deficit. And generally with hybrid training, a really great thing about it is that you're able to eat more and stay in a deficit than a purely strength athlete would be able to because of the higher demands of endurance training. So if you think about, say, 2,000 calories for ease at rest, we'll say that's what you burn just living day to day. That's your basal metabolic rate is what it's called. Now, let's say you do strength training. Say that adds 300 calories a day. It's not huge, right? So now we're at 2,300 calories. If you want to be in a 500 calorie deficit, you're looking at, what is that, 1,800? Yeah, 1,800 calories per day. Now, let's say you add endurance training on top of that, and you run like a long run on the weekend, and you run, say, speed work on Tuesday. So we'll average it out and say that now you're burning 2,800, maybe 2,900 calories on average per day. We'll say 2,800. So that's 500 extra calories. So now to be in a 500 calorie deficit, you have to eat 2,300 calories per day, which is 500 calories more than previously. And it's actually your base metabolic rate with exercise when you were just strength training. And so what this is going to allow you to do, the reason I kind of like this a lot more, is because it gives you a little more wiggle room, and it takes calories from your activity, and it doesn't quite cut into some of those minimums. So bodybuilders, physique athletes, they can get really low with their calories. I'm not a coach for those athletes. I'm not a coach for those sports. Generally, I'm not a fan of that with the athletes I work with. The reason being, your body needs a certain amount of calories to survive and just go through its processes. And the lower and lower you push your calories, the more stressed out your body gets, for a better sense of, without lack of better words there, the more stressed out your body gets. And I like to be able to be in a deficit and still eat a lot of calories, because that feels more sustainable for me and feels like less 5 alarm bells going off in your brain and your body as far as overall calorie intake, because you're not starving yourself. You're eating a lot of calories, but you're still in a deficit. So generally, I prefer this hybrid approach for anybody who's in a deficit, because it lets you eat more calories and still be in the same deficit and still lose weight at the same rate. So with that background, now you can really understand where I'm coming from with my recommendations, but also tweak them to meet your needs. I'm not a dietitian or nutritionist. Those require, at least here in the United States, extensive schooling and training, and a lot of it, and licensure. I'm not any of those. I am a coach, and I work with a lot of clients from strength, endurance, and hybrid athletes, and I've done this myself. So these are my general recommendations. They are not my recommendations for you specifically. You have to take this and run with it and adapt it to your life and what your body needs. I am not a dietitian, nutritionist, and I cannot know your life or how, or your calorie needs or how your training is going. So with that said, for hybrid athletes, I generally start out with very moderate calorie deficits, think aiming for like half a pound a week or less, maybe a pound a week. I kind of go highest amount, 1% of body weight, but that's the highest I really go for hybrid athletes, because the slower your deficit is, or the less aggressive your deficit is, the more lean muscle mass you're going to have, the better performance you're going to have, and the more you're going to be able to train and recover from. Before I set any real hard metrics, though, I like to get 5 to 7 days of a nutrition assessment where the athlete weighs themselves every single day and takes calorie measurements every single day, calorie and macros. And then I can sit down and do the math and say, all right, this is how many calories they ate this week. This is what their weight did this week. And so then we can start to make some more individualized, tailored recommendations for the client, for the athlete. Protein is important. I recommend focusing on protein, but you also have to focus on eating enough carbs. Carbs, if you download the PDF, it's going to go way more in detail on this, but carbs, they are what our body needs to fuel training. We need glucose, and the most efficient way to make glucose is with carbohydrates. Your body can use protein to make glucose, but it's fairly inefficient, and it also takes protein away from doing what protein does best, which is being the building blocks of the body, recovering tissue, building new tissue. We want as much protein as possible to go towards those functions. That's why everybody focuses on protein. But if you undereat carbs when you're doing hybrid or endurance training, not all that protein is going to go to your muscle. It's going to go to being turned to glucose and used for energy. So you need to also make sure you're eating enough carbs. I would say 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight for protein. And then carbs and fats you can fill in as you prefer based on your overall calorie limit for the day. But carbs are very important for making sure all that protein gets used for what we want it to be used for. Micronutrients and fiber are also very crucial. Micronutrients are important for our body, making sure we're as healthy as possible. That way we can recover as well as possible, as efficiently as possible. And fiber, if you look at the research, fiber intake is correlated with lower all-cause mortality. The higher your daily fiber intake, the lower your all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality is a measure of dying from things that are not basically accidents. So getting hit by a car, tripping and breaking your neck, something like that. Those would not be calculated in all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality is anything that's not an accident, basically. So the more fiber you eat, for every 10 grams of fiber more you eat, your risk of dying of all these diseases and things like that generally goes down. And fiber is very difficult nowadays. It's easy for me to go through a whole day and barely get 10 grams of fiber, 8 grams of fiber even. Especially endurance training, you're eating a lot of carbs that might not have the most amount of fiber in them. So my recommendation is to focus on fiber. I think the RDA for men is like 30 or 35 grams. So that's what I shoot for. It's actually a lot for me. I have to eat a lot of veggies and chia seeds or flax seeds to get that in. Fruits as well. Fruits are great. But focus on protein and carbs, and then really fiber and micronutrients for health. And then the last two things that I want to share with you are gradual changes. So don't try to change everything all at once. That's how you set yourself up for failure. Do that 5 to 7 days of nutrition assessment, set your goals, but then gradually make changes week to week. If you try to change everything all at once, it's going to work for a week or two and then it's not. And then you're going to just not go back to it because it was too hard. So make gradual changes, change a few things at a time, and then you'll look up in 6, 8, 12 weeks and be doing something completely different than you were before, but it won't have felt so severe. It won't have felt like, oh my gosh, I just changed my entire life. This is so hard, because you've done it gradually over 6, 8, 12 weeks and made a big difference over time, but done it in a sustainable way. And lastly, I want to share with you, don't underestimate behavior change in this process. Nutrition is very emotional. There's a lot of things that go on under the hood, and there is a lot of behavior change stuff that needs to happen in order to change how you eat, how you see food, your relationship with food, all of these things. So do not beat yourself up too much. Atomic Habits is a book that I would recommend highly. It is not about nutrition, but it is about habit formation and behavior change. Do not underestimate behavior change. It is probably the hardest part of this process, honestly. Knowing what to do is one thing. Knowing how to do it is another thing, and that is difficult. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this podcast. If you do want the written form and some more detail on a few of the topics I've talked about, use the link below to get the fueling guide. And if you're still kind of lost, still kind of unsure how your nutrition should look, you want some more individualized advice, my Instagram and email are in the description as well. You can reach out, email or Instagram, either works. Send me a DM or shoot me an email. I would love to talk to you specifically, individually, and get a better idea of what your struggles are, what your goals are, where you're currently at. And I can, at the very least, provide some more individualized guidance to you. Or if you're interested, we could always start a coaching relationship one-on-one where you would get exactly what you need, nutrition, training, and goal setting wise. And it would be tailored specifically to you, where you're at in life, what you need at the time. And you wouldn't have to worry about making a million changes at once, because the way I do things and the reason the coaching relationship is so powerful is because I can give you exactly what you need when you need it, no more and no less. That way you can just focus on executing, taking action, and living the rest of your life. That's all I've got this week. Do all the things if you enjoyed this podcast, like, rate, review, subscribe, all the things. It helps me reach more people and helps me get all this helpful information out to as many people as possible. I will see you guys in the next episode of the Assemble Performance Podcast.